I'm Elizabeth Yin, and I'm one of the general partners at Hustle Fund. I started the firm about 4 years ago after having been an angel investor, having run an accelerator, and previously for many years I ran my own startup where I had so many ups and downs, couldn't raise any money, and kind of figured things out along the way like so many of you. Unpopular opinion, you can sell almost anything before actually building it. So I have been a failed founder over the course of many years. I've had so many side projects that didn't go anywhere. I've sold all kinds of things. And the number one issue that I had with all of the side projects or side hustles that went nowhere was that we ended up building out way too much before trying to sell it. And then I read about Lean Startup with Eric Ries, Steve Blank, and all of those folks. And essentially what they said was, well, you actually want to de-risk your startup by figuring out what is the riskiest part and trying to deal with that first. And in most software businesses, the riskiest part is not getting enough customers to make the business work out. And so at that point on, actually, when we started my company LaunchBit, we decided we were not going to build a single thing and that we were just going to try to start pre-selling ads before we wrote any line of code. We ended up doing that, grew the business over the course of the next several years, and sold that company in 2014 to a much larger ad network. So largely true, first-time founders start consumer companies, and second-time founders start B2B companies. I think this definitely resonates with my own life experience. You know, when I was younger and starting all these side projects, most of which never went anywhere, I was focused largely on building things that consumers would want. But I think one of the challenges that I noticed was that it is really hard to build a consumer company because most consumer companies are really fun and you get people on emotion or entertainment or something like that. But if it is not really strong, it is not a natural need like making money or saving time or saving money or something like that. And most B2B companies, when you think about it, actually are about making more money or saving time, which is related to money. And so I think it's just a lot easier to find a real need in building a B2B company. And I think a lot of second-time founders realize it's just way too hard to find that need in entertainment and fun with consumer companies, and that's why they end up trying to make their lives easier by doing a B2B company. It's not to say you can't build a consumer company. There are plenty of very successful consumer companies, but I do think that that's the natural progression of a lot of first to second-time founders. As a CEO, your three roles are ensure your company doesn't run out of cash, hire well, and keep morale high. And that is it. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, well, you know, I'm a bootstrap startup or I'm just starting out, I can't hire anybody and all of that. And so really, I would say that these three rules very loosely apply from the beginning to the end, but what that actually looks like in terms of getting into the weeds will depend a lot on the stage. So for example, if you're the only person at your company, then hiring well is basically, you know, hiring yourself well or whatever you want to call it, or contractors, part-time contractors who are working with you a little bit at a time. So that's what I would mean by hiring well. Now, of course, if you're a CEO of a company that has 2,000 people, then hiring well means something very different. You're probably, you know, spending all of your time hiring and building teams to hire. And so each of these in terms of the details will differ a lot depending on stage. But at a high level, when you think about a business, these three things are important. You have to have enough resources for your companies to go. Even if you're doing phenomenally well, you have to be able to put $1 in so you can get $1.01 out. So that's the cash part. And it doesn't matter how you get the cash. It could be doing more sales, it could be fundraising, it could be taking out a loan, whatever it is. But you need those initial resources to get more resources. That pretty much is the definition of running a business. The second two things, hiring well and keeping morale high, well, number two, you need people to essentially manage these resources. You can certainly get a lot of leverage with technology and processes so that you don't need that many people, but ultimately at some point you need people in this organization to be managing those resources to get more resources. Lastly, because you need those people, you need them to stick around and do a good job for you, so that's why it's important to keep morale high. that actually doesn't really have to do very much, ironically, with what the company has. So for example, a lot of people tell me it's very hard to keep morale high when you have no money as a startup or whatever. But when you think about it, actually, if your startup has $0, do you remember how excited you were on day one of starting your company when you had nothing? That is keeping morale really high. So your job as CEO is to do these three things, because number one pretty much is the definition of a company, and 2 and 3 help you do number 1. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you are not your startup. Whatever happens to your startup will happen, but take care of yourself. You are important. I think that it is really easy as a startup founder to get so wrapped up in your company and to think that the ups and downs of whatever your company is doing is you. I certainly felt that way when I was running my company. You know, I would be super elated when we made a lot of money or when we raised some money, like somebody committed to us or whatever. And I would get, you know, obviously very down and upset when bad things happened. I remember this one time when a customer complained and asked for a refund of $45,000. I didn't have that money. You know, that money already had gone to pay other people. So I think that it can be really easy to just feel the emotions of whatever is happening in your startup and really carry that burden onto yourself. But reflecting back, it's a long game. You're not this one company. You're just one part of it, actually, even if you're the founder. It's really hard to imagine a world of when you look back in your life and you have a lot of different things that you've done. At that point, you realize actually it's about the whole journey of how you become as a person. And I think in this day and age when people are really trying to grapple with mental health and how to keep morale high and how to keep sane and how not to get depressed when doing a startup and you're working so hard, I think it's really important to keep this top of mind, that you are not your company. 10 years ago, I started my company and I could not raise any money. The economy was shit and my company was not venture backable. And so I did Craigslist gigs to pay the bills. Some of these gigs included things like I categorized whiskeys. I found this guy on Craigslist who was willing to pay somebody a bunch of money to basically categorize where every whiskey is from. I also critique people's resumes. Like a number of MBA students wanted to go to top-notch schools and they wanted somebody to look over their resumes. These were folks who wanted to better understand what should a US resume look like. All of these were international students. That paid the bills. And then I also allowed a Xerox PARC researcher to follow me around. Xerox PARC was paying for some study where they wanted to understand people's behavior with phones and communication at the time. So this researcher followed me to the grocery store, followed my co-founder some places, followed us to the office. So these are ways that you can pay the bills when no one will give you money. You do not need investors to start. First-time founders are obsessed with product. Second-time founders are obsessed with distribution. So I love this tweet that Justin tweeted. And in fact, actually, he did a follow-up tweet on this where he says he's reversing his position. I actually think that the first tweet, this one that you see right here, is right. I think that obviously building a company is a balance. You need a product, but you also need distribution or customer acquisition, however you want to call it. So which is more important? Well, you know, that's like asking which comes first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, you obviously need both. But when I think about most tech companies, I think that the number one problem actually for most tech companies is around distribution. Most people are not able to get enough customers, either fast enough or cheaply enough, or so that the unit economics work, or whatever you want to call it. And that isn't a product problem. That's a distribution problem. Now, if you're fortunate where you happen to have everybody coming to you and wanting to use your product or your service, that is an anomaly. It happens sometimes, and it happened to one of Justin's later companies, but I would say the vast majority of companies probably need most help in distribution, customer acquisition, and that's what I would focus on.